What's up, everybody? Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. Mike, you have posted a very interesting show, and I know a little bit about what you're going to cover, and I'm already stoked to hear what you're going to talk about. The description you gave me sounds like I couldn't have made up a better fucking episode.
Yeah, dude. It's got everything. Everything. It's kind of a weird mix of real life events that happened mixed with, I guess, eyewitness sightings and combined with some folklore and also maybe a little bit of internet creepypasta thrown in for flavor. But what I was telling Mateo was that this story is like part Skinwalker Ranch, part Phil Schneider with some UFO stuff thrown in and Soviet conspiracies. So it's got all sorts of flavors for whatever your particular kink is, I suppose.
But you see why I was excited.
Yeah. It's a good one. So I'm gonna start out talking about the reality of, well, I say the official story of the situation, then kind of get into the weirder stuff from there. But this is about an area of Bulgaria called Tsarichina, and outside of the little village of Tsarichina, the military kind of roped off this area of farmland in December of 1990. They just showed up on this area, roped it all off, and basically started excavating a hole in this area. The code name for the project was Operation Sunray, and it was led by Colonel Svetko Kanev, and he was doing this as part of an operation with the Bulgarian Ministry of Defense. The official reason for this excavation that was being done was that the Bulgarian government was looking for treasure that was rumored to have been there. So for centuries, there were rumors that Emperor Samuel's treasure had been buried there. Emperor Samuel, he was the emperor of the Bulgarian Empire in the late 10th into the early 11th century. And the story goes that before going to battle with the Ottoman Empire, he had this large amount of gold that he had buried to hide from the Ottomans if they were to have, defeated him in battle. And to this day, it had never been found, but the rumors were that it was in this area at the base of the hills. But as a result of this, Colonel Kanev was running this mission to excavate the treasure. For some reason, the military had to do it. I don't know if it had something to do with the government or if it was for other reasons, perhaps. I don't know. But the military came in, they basically roped the whole area off. Civilians weren't allowed inside. And then once the site was finally secured, the colonel ordered the digging to begin. And they were building this big hole that was going down into the earth in this area. They targeted this area specifically. But once the digging started, there was problems that started occurring with the equipment. The electrical equipment that they brought with them would start to malfunction. The excavators would just break down with no discernible reason. It would just, stop working, and then randomly it would just start working again. But it became such an issue that the excavation team had to break down and use pickaxes and shovels.
Wow.
And this was still relatively shallow. Like they weren't too deep down, but finally they get down to the depth of 6 meters. And once they hit that 6 meter deep mark, they dug through all the topsoil, all that shit. 6 meters for just to do a sloppy conversion is roughly around 18 feet. So they're 18 feet deep in the ground. We'll say just for argument's sake. Really, it's for the sake of Americans, let's be honest. The rest of the world is like, oh yeah, 6 meters. That makes perfect sense. Americans like, what the fuck are 6 meters? So for the benefit of our American friends, it's about 18 feet. A little more than 18 feet, but roughly 18. Anyway, once they get to this depth, they hit this thick layer of stone that they're not able to get through with hand tools. And the equipment wasn't working to get through it, so they couldn't rely on that. So they ended up having to use explosives to get through this thick barrier on the ground. And according to the story, once this thick layer had been broken, there was this spiral passageway underneath. And that spiral passageway led deep underground. So at that point, they started sending squadrons of soldiers into the area to kind of look through the tunnels. And as soon as, like, almost, I don't want to say instantly, but that same day that they broke through, weird shit started happening on the site. The guards that were set up around the actual dig site, they began seeing these 2 specific different kinds of creatures. One of them was 7-foot tall humanoid monsters, is what they called them. And occasionally they would also see these little tiny figures that were about a foot tall. And they would always be kind of moving around the perimeter fences just outside of the area that they were guarding.
Both beings, the little ones and the big ones?
They wouldn't be seen together. It would be like, sometimes they would see the big ones, sometimes they would see the little ones.
Okay. So
it's like it's 2 different types of beings. It's not like, a big and a small version of the same thing. But that's like typical trickster stuff, changing size and messing with your senses.
Right, possibly trying to cause confusion.
Yeah. The electrical interference continued, as well as seemed to also be affecting the radio equipment as well. So for the duration of the project, for the rest of the time they were excavating and exploring this hole, they had to run a landline from the nearby village all the way to the outpost where they had the perimeter set up just so they could communicate. They didn't have any other way because they couldn't radio back and forth. But when they would be using the landline to communicate, a lot of the time the operators that were running the landlines would report hearing whispering in the background of the phone calls. But it was kind of like almost like an inaudible whisper, like where you can just hear the whisper, but you can't make out what they're saying.
Okay, so again, we're running into something that has now, I don't want to say supernatural with the creatures, we'll say cryptozoological aspect, and now a paranormal aspect of voices over the phone or the radio.
Yeah, essentially. And it seems that's something that, you see in a lot of these cases where there's multiple different things occurring. There's always kind of a paranormal vibe, I guess. But I think there could be an explanation outside the paranormal. Well, I guess it depends on what you call paranormal. But like when I say paranormal, I think I'm talking more like ghost haunting stuff specifically, not so much like aliens or cryptids or even possession, like possession or demonic type stuff. I would call that like paranormal, I suppose. And I'll get to what it could be in a bit. Psychics get involved and some communication sort of stuff happens. So I think this could be part of that.
Ooh.
But they haven't brought them in yet. We're not at that point yet. Before they bring them in, the area, the soldiers and the surrounding area start receiving reports, as well as the soldiers themselves witnessing all sorts of different UFOs. And there were some that looked like classic now, but like the flying black triangle. There were some that were just like these bright lights in the sky. And there were even some that looked like they were shooting flames out of them as it moved across the sky.
I hate to bust in with another sidetracking question, but as far as triangle UFOs go, do you remember hearing about triangle-shaped UFOs before the Phoenix Lights?
There was the Belgian ones in the 80s, but to me, it seems more likely that those sightings in Belgium were the stealth bomber. But, because it was still classified at that point. So it could have been test flights before it was declassified, maybe. I mean, it's possible, but I think I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it was the 80s. But then, no, not until Phoenix Lights.
Right.
And I remember when I first saw the Phoenix Lights, I assumed it was like different, like craft flying in formation rather than a singular one. But, then you hear the witnesses talk about it, and clearly it was a singular thing based on the witness reports.
Yeah, I just got to listen to 3 hours of Art Bell not take calls, but interview people who witnessed the Phoenix Lights. It's just fascinating to hear it from people who actually saw it.
Yeah, hearing the witnesses talk about that it's really hard to, when you have that many witnesses that were independent witnesses that had nothing to do with one another that report seeing the same thing. How can you discount that?
Right.
It's I don't know, man.
For me, it's a lesson in how society takes something like that. We've talked about it before, but I don't know what the fuck I was doing when the Phoenix Light stuff happened. But
I remember seeing it on the news, and being like, "Oh my God, there's UFOs on the news," but because the internet wasn't like a big thing at that point, and I think I may have had AOL in '97, but I had no idea how to look for shit on the internet. It was, for one, it was AOL, so to me it was like the internet was chat rooms basically, when you're that young. But yeah, I don't know. I remember seeing it and being pumped about it, and then kind of falling away until I got older and started really actively researching things on the internet. Right,
and that's exactly what I mean. It was a lesson in how society would handle something like that, because it was on the news for like a week, and then that was it.
Nobody took it serious. I mean, even really up until the past like 5 years, the news has never taken the shit serious. It's every single fucking time like it's a goddamn joke, and they're so fucking original. They play the X-Files music, like, oh, X-Files. Like, it's so fucking dumb. You're not original. It's not funny. Fuck all the way off. But yeah, so Phoenix Lights. I don't even. What the hell? How do we get to the Phoenix Lights? What the fuck was I talking about?
Okay, sorry for the sidetracking question again. You were talking about how the soldiers started seeing all sorts of UFOs, including triangle.
Yeah, and that people in the village were seeing it as well. There was even these weird events that took place. So in about a year after they started this, so they started December 1990. This happened November 91. Local villager he was walking home at night, and all of a sudden this bright light shined down on him from the sky. And that's the last thing he remembers. The next morning, he woke up, had no idea what happened after that light shined on him, and he was in a village 40 miles south of where he had been walking.
Whoa.
So, like, what the fuck do you make of that shit?
I mean, knowing what we know now and knowing about other reports, that it can only be an abduction.
That's really what it sounds like. It's fucking weird, though, man.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was another weird UFO sighting that was reported, but this was the following year in June. But another one of the local residents woke up with her dogs going ape shit. She looks outside to investigate, and she thinks she sees something, so she opens up the front door, and there's these three, she just called them shadowy figures, but they were running across her land, coming from the direction of the excavation site. And she said she watched them run across her property into a nearby tree line. And once they got within the trees, she said this bright white light shot up into the sky and disappeared. So she was obviously alarmed by this, so she actually reported it to some of the soldiers. So Colonel Konev actually had a team go investigate, and they saw in the ground, within the tree line, or in the area where she described this light coming from, there was a burned patch of ground indicating something hot had been there. And then the soldiers that went to investigate, within the next few days, they all started feeling really sick and suffered from exhaustion and were actually confined to their beds for a few days.
Ooh, classic radiation sickness, maybe?
Perhaps. Yeah, I don't know. It's fucking weird, man. But the soldiers were excavating this place for 2 years. And after 2 years of excavating this weird spiral tunnel, they found their path again blocked by this huge, they said it was stone, but it was polished, smooth, and shaped like a concave lens. And so they had to figure out a way to get through this weird polished stone. And eventually they were able to break through. And once they broke through, they apparently found this area that was said to be like polished stone, like I would assume probably vitrified stone, but it was all just smooth stone. But before they had got to this point, they were warned. Well, for one, they were warned by this famous, I guess you'd call her a psychic or a mystic. We've mentioned her on the show before. I don't remember if it was in passing or how much detail we got, but her name was Baba Vanga, and she's a Bulgarian mystic. She kind of came into prominence in the 70s and 80s. She made like predictions and was kind of like she would see the future, stuff like that. But I think in 91, or maybe it was early 92, she actually was visiting this area, and she warned the soldiers to steer clear of this place. And she told them that there was a non-human entity that existed in the hole, and that they shouldn't communicate with it.
No way.
Yeah. And the military ended up bringing in a couple of psychics as well. And a lot of the information that we have regarding this hole and what happened in it comes from Colonel Kanev, as well as one of the psychics named Eli Laganova. And from them, we kind of get some idea of what happened inside the chamber. But so in doing the research for this, I found some different sources on this, and it's established that the hole was dug. The reason for the hole being dug was allegedly to find this treasure. All that is established fact. And it's also established fact that after 2 years, the military pulled out, filled the hole with concrete, and never went back. It's also established fact that in an independent investigation that occurred many years later, I think in like 2016 or somewhere in there, somewhere in the 2010s, the Bulgarian news channel was trying to do an investigation, and they found that all documents pertaining to this were intentionally destroyed. So we know all of this stuff, all of that to be fact. Everything else that we know about this comes from Colonel Kanev and Eli Longanova. And then, but there is one part of the story, the part that makes it really Phil Schneidery, that I don't know. This part I found only on a video by Bedtime Stories, which is a fucking awesome channel on YouTube. But I know sometimes they add their own flair in, kind of to I don't know, to make the story theirs or to make it more interesting. I don't know. So I'll talk about that, but just want to throw it out there that the only place I found this story was in their video. So it's possible that it was written specifically for the video, but I'll let you guys know when I get to that point. But according to the reports from the colonel and the psychics, the tunnel, they described the tunnels and how they kind of, the tunnel network spiraled downward, and there was central chamber where all of these tunnels kind of came and went from. And according to the colonel himself, the center chamber had this humanoid unknown being that was, it was like skeletal, and it was kind of fused into the rock. And the rock in this chamber was perfectly smooth, but he said under the surface of it, there were these symbols that looked like hieroglyphs. So it's almost like it was carved and then coated in glass or something. But the colonel admitted that the story of Emperor Samuel's lost treasure was always a cover story. It was never, that was never the real reason.
I mean, doesn't that sound like a cooked up idea? Yes, we're going to go look for a treasure. We're going to spend government funds and stuff to go look for a buried gold box.
Yeah. The Ark of the Covenant is buried deep in that hole. He said what had actually led them there, why they went specifically to that location, is that they had this group of psychics and remote viewers that they were working with, and they described something that was buried underneath the surface in that specific area. And they described it. The military had designated it as object number 1.
Scary.
And, the colonel also admitted that some of his men died due to exposure to some strange bacteria that they were not aware of.
Oh, wow. I was expecting it to be the guys who seemingly were dosed with radiation.
No, it was people within the tunnels.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And he also claims, and this is a big claim, but he also claims that there were some of his soldiers who had been teleported to different areas of the site, and when they found them, they were dead, but they were fused into the rock of the tunnel itself.
Ooh, we've heard of something like that happening before.
Yeah, like fucking Philadelphia experiment.
That's strange, though. I mean, something like that's supposed to happen during something called the Philadelphia experiment, not something that's like an archaeological dig.
Yeah, but I wonder if it's like, because, you know, with the Philadelphia experiment, there's for one, the whole did it happen thing, but also there's like a conspiracy theory within the conspiracy theory that it was testing of alien technology. So like, what if this is alien technology?
Oh, that they've dug up? Oh, right, okay.
Right,
okay.
Right. They didn't realize what they were fucking with, and they get teleported into the fucking wall. There's a lot of, see, the thing with this is how reliable are these, is this like a thing where these are unreliable witnesses? Like, is the colonel just a disgruntled guy who's like, I'm gonna make up a story about it? But and the psychics, whenever you hear psychics, you never know for sure if it's like scam artist or someone who has real abilities. It's hard to say. But Ellie Laganova, who she's the only person who is involved with this, who's been trying to get support for another excavation and to look at to go into the tunnels again and explore. But She said that the entity that lived inside of this tunnel was one of mankind's oldest ancestors. And she said it had been trying to guide people to this location for thousands of years. And one of the things she said that this thing had communicated to her was that it tried to get Hitler. Like, it had tried to contact Hitler, and that's part of the reason why Hitler invaded Russia, was to try to find this location and secure it.
And we know he was looking for the weirdo stuff.
Yeah. But she was told a lot of weird shit, and she ended up ended up writing like a bunch of journals. I think she filled 4 journals with visions that this entity had shown her. All of these journals were confiscated by the Bulgarian army, though. But in there, she had warnings from them. She had descriptions of ships that are supposed to be able to travel through space using the power of the sun. Information about clothing that could be worn that would repel bullets. But I've got something that she wrote down, and it's translated from Bulgarian, so I'm going to try to make it make as much sense, because it's kind of like done in broken English. But one of the one of the excerpts says, "When excavations were carried out, the aliens told me that the search should stop. Do not dig. It is not your time. There is, in the center of the earth, at the depth of 2,000 kilometers, a crystal, one as big as the sun. Do not touch it. They will disturb the atmosphere. It is a large crystal that is dangerous and will remain there as long as the earth exists. It controls its movement. Stop digging, because otherwise the earth will die. Difficult days will come for people. There will be many new terrible diseases if you dig. There is hell in the hole, but it is not hell as you know it. There are people who live there like us, but their origins are different. There is also a space device sent from an alien civilization. There are astronauts down there. Thousands of years ago, when your country did not even exist, a civilization from another planet sent a spaceship with 3 astronauts to Earth. They were not humans, but robots, to explore life on Earth, but they were damaged and the spacecraft crashed in Tsarichina. With each meter you dig, more and more radiation is emitted. Do not dig. It is not your time."
Wow. Okay, so this crystal is supposed to be as big as the sun inside the earth?
Yeah, that part thinking might have been an issue with the translation, maybe.
Right.
But you get the gist of what it's saying. Big ass crystal, fucking don't mess with it.
How interesting. That's not the normal peace, love, and bud crystals message aliens usually give.
No.
It's a straight
Not
up
at all.
warning about a certain item.
Yeah. There was also another source of this information. There was this military professor named Delcho Naplatanov, and he's the one who came out, but his daughter was part of the expedition because she also has psychic abilities. So, and as I mentioned, they were working with psychics on this project. So this military professor said his daughter was working on the project, and his daughter was also, before she was part of this project, his daughter was contacted by Baba Vanga, and she warned his daughter Marina specifically not to disturb whatever creature lived beneath the tunnels.
Wow.
And so this professor said that his daughter worked with Colonel Kanev directly and would actually go into the tunnels with him and his group. But whatever she saw in the tunnels really upset her, because once everything was done and she returned back from the site, she acted weird, and one day, just out of the blue, decided to jump off the roof of a building and killed herself.
Holy hell.
Yeah, so something happened to her that really messed with her.
Jeez.
So, as I mentioned, after 2 years of this, very suddenly the military just pulled out, covered it up with cement, and got out of there. They claim the reason being, according to them, was that they didn't have enough funding to continue. But to me, it seems weird that all the records would be destroyed, and why they would fill the hole with concrete rather than just fill it back in with dirt. Because I mean, like I mentioned, this was basically farmland that they had started digging this hole in. So why not just fill it with dirt again? Why specifically fill it with concrete to seal it?
That's like what they do to caves. People die and shit, or mines and stuff like that. Stuff that's deemed dangerous.
Yeah, and in the years following the closure, there have been various people that have gone out to investigate. There was one team of researchers from the University of Sofia that decided to camp out near the area, and their intention was to conduct they wanted to conduct a test that might explain more, like if the army was looking for like anomalous objects or something. So what they were basically doing, they were scanning the area to find any like variations in the electromagnetic field or anything like that. But their goal was to spend 20 days, and by the end of the first week, they had already spotted multiple UFOs and had a poltergeist encounters. Well, I don't know if you call it encounter, but there was poltergeist activity that occurred where their equipment had actually been picked up and thrown around with nothing, nothing was there. Just all of a sudden their shit starts getting tossed around. And then they had this, at one night while they were camping, they had this craft fly out really low over the campsite, and it shined a beam down on the campfire, which made the campfire flare up and burn out of control. And that, for them, that was it. And they got out of there.
Oh, wow. Skinwalker indeed, dude.
Yeah, right?
Holy crap.
So the colonel mentioned that there was this area that it was within the main chamber where this being was, but there was this area that had like this force field sort of thing, and they couldn't get through it, and some of his soldiers tried, and they ended up hurting themselves from trying to get through it, but they couldn't. Like I mentioned, there is a story, and this is the Phil Schneider thing, that I only heard it on that Bedtime Stories video. I'm going to share it here because it's a cool fucking story, but I think it was written specifically for the video as kind of like an explanation of what happened at the final time they were down there. So the story told by the Bedtime Stories video picks up kind of at that point. And they tried to push through it. They can't get through it. And all of a sudden, one of the soldiers gets picked up out of midair and smashed against the wall. And basically, it kills him by breaking his neck against the wall. And the other soldiers start firing. And when they're firing into this force field thing, but it stops the bullets in midair, and the bullets fall to the ground. And another one of the soldiers that's shooting gets picked up and thrown against the wall and is also killed.
Damn.
So the soldiers they make a break for it. Colonel Konov orders the retreat. They all run off, and they're making their way back up along the spiral tunnel to get back to the hole that they were digging. As they're walking back, they leave two men in the back, like as the rear guard, and the rest of the party runs ahead. They hear the gunfire behind them, and there's no more from these people. The gunfire just gets cut off, and then this faint green light starts to shine on the floor and coming around from the tunnel behind them. And it seems to be growing brighter and brighter, and they hear this vibrating noise coming, from that direction. To me, this sounds like fucking something from Lovecraft. Like they're setting up all these things. There's this unknown horror behind them that's killing the people they leave behind, and the ones that are escaping just hear this noise and see a glowing light, and that's it.
Yeah, I was gonna say this already sounds like Lovecraft.
Yeah. And so the rest of the party, they're able to get out, and then medics come in, help them out, and they try to seal the tunnel entrance using excavators, but as I mentioned earlier, the equipment doesn't work. So they try to get military tanks that are on the perimeter guarding. They try to get them to fire into the hole. They break down. So they end up having to use explosive charges around the outside, and they blow it up. The tunnel caves in on itself, and then he orders it filled with concrete. Wow. So to me, that story is very similar to the Phil Schneider thing, but also very Lovecraftian. Because I could only find this specific story in that video, I'm thinking that that's not really part of the story as it really occurred. But again, how much of the story is real, we don't know. I actually talked to somebody from Bulgaria to see if this was, like just bullshit on the internet. And he couldn't vouch for like all the weird shit, but he did vouch for the fact that the hole was actually dug and then later filled in 2 years later, and that it was supposed to be because they were hunting for treasure. That's all that he could vouch for. But the fact that the hole was actually dug and then the military suddenly pulled out and filled the hole 2 years later is not in dispute. But everything else, it's really whether or not you believe the witnesses, I suppose, because apparently UFO activity is still pretty frequent in that area.
Wow. Okay. So there's a lot of weird stuff in this case, obviously, but there's a lot of weird stuff that makes stuff even weirder. The fact that they admitted to digging this shit to go look for a buried treasure, like I said, that's weird. And then for somebody to be from there, just like exclude all the weird stuff, that's cool. But for them to know about this dig, in search of this treasure, that's weird. And it kind of almost opens it up for, I don't know, like legend growing, local myth building.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Everybody there can, like, the locals can say they closed it down after 2 weeks for whatever fucking reason. This comes with witnesses. This comes with like professional people making statements about the odd side of this case. Now, you had mentioned before them using psychics and remote viewers, and I know there's a lot of people who scoff at that. What's your take on, I know what you think about psychics, but what do you think about remote viewing? And we've talked about it before, but your feelings on it as far as something trying to be used as evidence in a case like this?
Well, to use it as credible evidence, I don't think you can do that because there's no way to prove that. But I think remote viewing, I think there's a certain reality to it, and I don't think it's necessarily psychic ability. I think it's like an innate human ability that we have to kind of tap into the greater universe and kind of use the connection to the universe to see things that are beyond our normal scope of seeing. And I think that there's ways to train yourself to do that. And the fact that people are able, in tests, people have been able to get really weird, like the hits that they get are more than what I would call coincidence.
100%. There's so much documentation on that stuff now to where it is more than coincidence, for sure. I agree. That kind of leads me into the second part of that question. If the government's willing to spend money on things like psychics and remote viewing, if they're willing to spend years worth of research and resources to learn about that, do you think people shouldn't be so quick to scoff at that? In the common people's world, a psychic is somebody with a 1-900 number who's going to tell you about your relationship stuff. But on a military aspect side of this, from the military's point of view, those are assets.
Yeah. And honestly, if you think about it, if there's truth to the fact that, or if there's truth to the story that that psychics are really being utilized by the military and everything, it would make sense that, one, they would be so heavily discredited in quote unquote the real world. Like, nobody takes that shit seriously, even when there's like undeniable evidence or I guess not evidence, but like when faced with something that doesn't make any sense for any other reason other than like you're fucking psychic. But it's like the alien thing, you know. For how long has it been people that see aliens are backwoods yokels? And you can't believe them anyway. They're probably drinking moonshine and fucking their sister. That sort of thing with psychics too, but instead it's always the con artist psychic. They're just there to take your money. And then you've got people that are easily duped and because psychics are a thing, there's people that do prey on it. So there are psychics that are con artists as well. But I do think that there's actual abilities there. And the fact that the government is exploring those abilities and attempting to harness them and use them for certain things. And just so we know about certain aspects of that, but just think of all the shit we don't know about that the government has not declassified about those type of tests and experiments they've done. Like maybe there's all sorts, maybe they did perfect the psychic bullet.
No kidding, man. It's weird to me. I always found that weird. I mean, the government's is up to a whole bunch of weird, creepy shit. If you really dig into MK Ultra, you're going to run into some disturbing shit. I guess it doesn't surprise me, but I don't know. When you talk about MK Ultra, I guess that's more conspiracy rather than something that's shared with, like I said, common people, non-governmental, non-military people. We know about Miss Cleo and Sylvia Brown and what's that dude's name? John Edwards. That's a psychic to us, like you said. It's weird how that con artist thing comes into it. Do you think that has a lot to do with religion?
Well, I think it's really a difference between psychics and mediums, you know, two different types of con artists. Because, you know, the psychics are going to look at your future or your love life or whatever, all that bullshit. And the mediums are going to be like, hey, we're going to connect you with your dead loved one who starts with a B, or is it a D, maybe G. Yeah, grandma. Yep, it was your grandma, and so on and so forth. You know the spiel.
Yep. Did you have parents?
Did you have parents and or a brother or sister or friend or cousin or dog? Did you have a dog? Was it a cat? A gerbil? You had a goldfish. Yes, it was your goldfish.
You're a mammal, right? Okay, that's what that's what I was getting.
Yep, getting that. You are in fact warm-blooded. Warm-blooded? Is there anybody in the audience that's... Yes, ma'am, you are warm-blooded. Yes, I knew it was a warm-blooded individual, so I came this way. I felt it coming from this way.
I'm sensing somebody with like a pulse over here in this area.
Somebody with skin. I'm looking for some skin. Don't even need to be alive at this point. You have skin.
2 eyeballs. I'm looking for someone with 2 eyes.
Get out of here, spider. I see all 8 of those eyes.
You too, Captain Jack. We all know about your war injury.
Yeah.
Eat it.
Yeah. Kick rocks, you son of a bitch.